Social. I am Jonah Ruffin.
I'm Jayla Jackson.
I'm Daya Brown.
I'm Sinai Edwards.
And I'm Zayla Bryant.
And how y'all feeling today?
It's the ratchet smack for me.
Not pop.
That's how I'm feeling. Very much. Like,
Very
No.
much. It's
Okay.
not.
That's not a lie. That is not a lie.
How are you
I'm
doing
just
today?
playing.
I could
I'm
do without
doing
hearing your
good.
mouth.
Okay, with the greens, with the pearls. Okay.
Yeah, this is my signature. Y'all probably like keyword
We don't
sanctuary every
care.
time.
Wow. Okay.
Ooh, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm kidding for you.
Anyways.
Why is your humor so dark?
Literally.
Right.
But yeah, the pearls are my signature. Just have to put that out there. How y'all feeling though?
I'm
Yeah.
feeling all right. How you feeling?
I'm feeling
Yeah.
like
All
a
right.
break
All right.
A
in
break.
the chains,
Okay.
in the shackles.
So let's go ahead and get into what that really
That's
means.
what I'm feeling like.
I think we've all been waiting for the conversation of generational cycles. And that's really needs to be talked about today.
Honestly, we've been talking about it and hyping this topic up,
Yes.
and it's finally time. So if y'all don't mind,
Let's talk about it. All right, so we first have to start off with what in the world generational cycles is. I think instead of saying generational curses, we should change the term into saying generational cycles. So we get it. We have these chains going through our bloodline per se of what our ancestors have done, and the repetitive cycle of what it is and what it isn't is actually scaring us to this day. And I really want to really talk about that and talk about the origins and to come with the solvency, which we will get to towards the end of the conversation. But for right now, let's talk a little bit about generational cycles. What are generational cycles to you? Let's start off with that question.
You want to start, Daya?
Yes, Miss
Yeah.
Brown.
Okay.
Miss
Yeah.
Brown.
That's a nice example.
Honestly, I can be transparent about my generational cycles right now. My generational cycles kind of stem from wanting success so much that I forget everybody else behind me, or I forget how to love, or I end up at the top and I just end up lonely. My generational cycles is the repetitive nature of wanting success, but not knowing how to properly obtain it. And so that's honestly my worst fear, because I'm like, I don't want to give up on people and I don't want to be lonely, because I know the feeling of being lonely is not a great feeling. And I've seen it have negative impacts on the certain people in my family that are not great, to a point where it affects their mental health, to a point where it affects their children. And so that's why I'm saying today is the day where it stops with me. So what is generational cycles to you, Miss Jayla Jackson?
I feel like I have an interesting perspective here because we added we changed the terminology and saying generational cycles, but it did start generational curses, right? And I like the generational cycle because it's more inclusive, right? Because it can be a positive cycle or it can be a negative. And if we look at my family history, technically my mother and my father are the first break in the chain, right? Meaning that leaves me with the responsibility of continuing. To not to fall back into what they, broke, right? So I'm the second link in the chain link that they're creating. So I feel like that adds, obviously there's pressures being the first one to do it.
Right.
But when, you're the second one and you have to continue, something that is new or something that's just created, it's a different energy around it. And it comes with different things. But I am definitely grateful that half the work has already been done. All that is up to me to do now is to listen and to execute.
Bless you.
Bless you.
And
Y'all know allergy
dissimilar,
season. Allergy season.
Daya is working to be, a chain, a break in that link, right, towards the direction that she wants to go in. And I feel like that's a lot of work,
it
right?
is.
And I'm glad that you have spaces where you can kind of share and get help with that. But for me personally, my focus has always been, how do I continue the break that my parents already created?
Right.
What about you,
Mr. Ruffin?
Mr. Jonah?
I will say, the generational cycle, I think that can y'all come back to me actually? Because I feel like I need to develop everything that I had to say, Okay, come to me last. I'll go last.
All right. Let me see. I've been pondering. Let me see. I think a generational cycle in my family, it comes with the women and their relationships with their children and their men and their husbands. Like, with their husbands, with their husband and their children, they seem to be, what's the thing called? Not submissive to them, but they become a servant to them so much that they minimize themselves in the greater scheme of things, knowing good and well without this central link of who they are, everything would shatter and everything would fall apart. And I see that on my dad's side of the family. I see that with my dad's relationship with my brothers. I see that with my dad's relationship with my grandfather, and I see that with my nana. I see that with my mother. I see that with my mother and how she treats her kids and how her ex-husband is. And I guess I don't want to be that way, which is my biggest fears, which is why I'm hesitant about being a mother, because I know what to expect from the precedents that has been set.
Right.
Okay.
And then fearful to be a woman to somebody else.
Right.
To be somebody else's woman. And I don't want to get lost in the title of being claimed by somebody else but I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to find the balance of keeping my identity while still kind of merging identities with somebody else.
Right.
To make like children, live a life together.
Right.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to dissect that.
Oh, okay. You want me to go? I got it now. Yeah. Okay. So I have it. A generational cycle in my family is the men have always been the strong black man. They've always been the head of the family. They've always guided the family. They've always had a woman to stand by them, and they've always just been that prominent figure that everybody can like depend on. But I think that the generational cycle that I'm kind of like breaking is my dad and I realize that that's not going to be me. I'm not going to be that strong black man I am strong, but I'm not going to have that, I'm not going to, girl.
She wrong for that.
I'm not gonna be a father, the ideal father. I obviously have my personal decisions, and I have things that I comply to that I think are gonna be different than what my family seems or deems as normal. And I think that it's kind of like a process of them accepting that it's just gonna be that way, and like kind of myself understanding like the weight behind that, to know that I'm gonna be the first one in my family to do something like this. I'm the first gay black man in my family, literally, and it's like that. I feel like that has so much weight. Like it's like I have such.
Is it a burden or is it a responsibility?
I think it's just a lot of eyes on me. Like I always feel like I have eyes on me in my family. It's like they're always watching what I do because I'm not the norm. And it's like when you see something that's different, you always want to look at that thing that's different because it's different, And I think that it's something that I have to accept and I have to fully immerse myself into and just fully be ready for what's to come.
I have a just quick question about that. Is there like a stigma against like homosexuality in your family?
If you want the tea, babes, if you want the tea, just say that.
Not only
if you want the tea.
I just wanted to know.
Not only in your family, I'm sorry to cut you off, but not only in your family, but in society in general, does that fuel what the thing in your family?
Okay, so, family, if you're watching this, sorry. But,
he still loves you.
I still love y'all, of course. But, my family is very religious. Like, especially my dad's side of the family, they're very religious. And,
Good.
Oh yeah, okay, I need to stop hitting the table. But I honestly think that there is, and I will be honest, they don't look at it as normal. They think that it's something that's different. It's like, but why? Like, why?
Most Southern black families.
Right. And I think that it's something that I have gotten accustomed to because it's obviously, it's going to happen.
Right.
And I think that, honestly, the stigma's there, but I'm not going to let that stigma hinder me. I'm not gonna let that stigma hold me back. I'm not gonna not be I'm not gonna not be who I am because of that stigma,
Yeah.
So that's really like where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait.
Sanaa, did you have
you had a question?
Girl.
Yeah,
a question.
Not a question. You got to tell your story. I'm sorry.
I have one, but I wanted to like take a different approach, not more the emotional side, I guess.
Yeah.
But with HBCUs and like that whole black. Most of my family has gone to HBCU, and if not, they have definitely pledged to a sorority or fraternity, and that has like a lot of pressure in itself, especially in my family, because I'm in 9th grade, and do you want to be a Delta or AKA? Do you want to be a Zeta? Like, what do you want to be? And personally, I don't know even if I want to pledge or not, but because there's been so many people in my family, like, everybody in my family, it's so much pressure for me to pledge. It's so much pressure for me to go to HBCU, even though I might not want to.
I'm curious to hear y'all's take, because what I'm hearing from each individual is that fear is actually stopping us from tackling these generational cycles or officially breaking them. So I wanted to talk to you about that. I want to really dissect this fear of losing yourself. So can you tell me a little bit more about that so we can unravel it?
Talking about my fear of losing my identity.
Losing your identity, yes.
I guess I've never seen a close example of a woman not losing herself when she comes in contact with a man. And I think that we really hype up, especially like women, really becoming so infatuated and submerged. Anyways, y'all know what word I'm trying to say. Really deep into that person, really trying to figure them out. Oh, this language is convoluted, and I hate it. I sit here and I listen to my homegirls talk about how, oh my God, this boy is so dreamy, he's so great, blah, blah, blah. And I find myself, if there is a guy in my life, I find myself doing the same thing. And I'm like, what are you doing? Snap out of it. It is not that deep, and it's not that important. And so that is just, like, for me, it's difficult for me to tackle that identity problem because of the standards I have for myself. And that's the only thing I think is different between me and my grandmother and all them, because it's really difficult for me to even find a man that is up to my standards. And then when I do find them, there's always something wrong.
So what if
they always let you down? They always do this, that, you know?
Or it just can't happen right now.
Right. And it's just it's a lot.
And you know what it is? And y'all know, Taylor gonna get scientific. Yeah. I got my contacts on today. I didn't bring my glasses, but I'm still taking to the scientific.
Lay that knowledge on you.
Right? There's this concept of epigenetics, right? And it's the study of irritable changes in gene expression, right? And basically what it tracks specifically is honestly how behaviors and environment change your gene expression, right? So a change in phenotype without a change in genotype changes the way that your cells read your genes, right? Meaning that with enough trauma, right, with enough repeated behavior, it can literally be written in your DNA.
Exactly.
So if you come from a long line of people living in poverty who have, a certain mindset, it can almost become genetic for you to think and feel a certain way.
Right.
And we see it a lot with Black people. Yes. And we question, like, why do I feel this way? I shouldn't be feeling this way. Where is this coming from? And, it reminds me of the podcast that we did about, having that relationship with your parents, because you need to know some of these things. You need to know who you're descended from, so it makes sense, because epigenetics is a real...
Right.
It's a real
thing.
And you have
and it's
to
impactful.
Because otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure out what's wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you. It has been written in your genes.
Right. So with that, can we blame, or I don't want to put a blame, but do we think it is our ancestors' fault? Yeah.
I mean,
well, it depends on how far back you want to track it.
Right. Because if
we're going far back,
shoot, white people.
It wouldn't really nothing.
What?
I think that
why are you just saying white people like that? Anyways,
if we're going back to, you want to go?
You go ahead. Say what you got to say.
Well, if we're going to go back to slavery, I think that our ancestors had no control over that. So it wasn't necessarily our fault, because we couldn't get out of that per se. Yeah. So the reparations that we have to pay because of slavery, reparations. Are they
repercussions?
No,
it's repercussions.
Okay.
Repercussions.
I don't think it's reparations.
It's repercussions.
Child,
it's repercussions.
Y'all know what I mean. Anyways, I think the things that we have to
go ahead
face because of slavery is something that is not it's not our fault. For instance, Black women, like, losing themselves in the midst of trying to find a man. I think that is a direct correlation to slavery and massa. Do you see that correlation?
Oh, okay. That's a stretch.
No. Let me break it down.
I can see how there's like similarities, but
because
direct
look,
correlation.
I wouldn't, honey, yeah.
That letter, baby.
That letter.
No. Okay, let me break it down what I was trying to say. So, okay.
Shoot, let me break it up now.
So, black women they were used as bait for white men. Like, white men would rape them. They would use them as, like, just...
Optional.
Like, they would use them as objects to just, like, pleasure, like, whatever they wanted to. And I think that is, like, sometimes... No, I can't go.
And add on, but no, you're partly correct in what you're saying, that it does have a connection to slavery, right? And in slavery, what we saw is that for the male slaves, right, they would strip the mind and leave the body, right? Taught to, not know how to think for themselves, but just physically do. Versus this forced the female slave, who was still procreating and having babies, and she had motherly instincts, to take on what traditionally is known as a male role, but without a support system. Now you're doing everything. That's that cape mentality, that Superwoman mentality. So you are partly correct in saying that it dates back to slavery. And I think to kind of blow it up, right? Because we are black and we experience that. But I feel like we can blow this thing up to encompass many people. Because think about it like this, right? If you are a descendant, right, from a long line of slave masters, which then turned into capitalists, or which then turned into, to colonizers, to slave masters, to imperialists, to capitalists, right? On the other end, right? Because we were, some of our ancestors were slaves. What about the descendants of the masters, right? Is there something even written in their genetics that, those same things that we're talking about that could be written in our DNA? I feel like that could go for anybody, for both parties of the situation.
Yeah, I think it's just really tough to track when it comes to slavery.
It is. Yeah.
I can only see from the examples that go as far as the lineage that I know of.
Right, and that's what I wanted to address here, because I think we all here have observed what has been happening in our own families, in your family, and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think that's the ability that we have the ability to say, hey, this is a generational cycle and it has to end today.
Right.
But I think specifically in the Black American community, they tell you like, okay, deal with it, but they do not tell you how to deal with it. And it's this amazing study that I found that can honestly help with it, and it's called shadow work. It's basically analyzing your unconscious self and bringing it into one perspective. And the conscious self is something that you do not want to come out. It's something that you do not realize most of the times, but you always hide it. And I think when addressing the unconscious self, it brings it closer to saying. It brings it closer to actually breaking these cycles.
Right.
And to add on to that, shadow work specifically talks about the marriage between the unconscious and the conscious.
Right.
Finding the bridge between the two, because most of the time, people live in one world. Right?
Wait, but before we even do that, can you guys define what subconscious and conscious are?
Yeah. Okay.
And then also with that, if it's ingrained in our DNA, how can we really move away from it and change it if it's ingrained, and it's going to be ingrained in our kids' DNA.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get into all of this, right? Okay. The conscious mind is right. It's our front brain.
Yes.
Technically, this is what we know, what we have learned. This is more of nurture, in my opinion, than nature. The unconscious mind or the subconscious, right, which is like the back brain,
the unawareness,
right? That's literally. In my opinion, it's nature. It's instinct, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we have physical instincts and stuff like that. But when you grow up, you are taught certain things, right? You are taught how to react to certain things. You are taught. There's so much that is learned,
right?
That the unconscious it basically goes unused.
Yeah.
So what we see a lot of times, like when people go to therapy to understand, like, oh, I'm doing this, but I feel this way. And they can't put a name or a word to the way they're feeling, is because most of it lives in their unconscious, in their subconscious. How we talk about there's stuff going on mentally. There's things registering mentally, and you don't even know that it's happening. Yeah, that's the unconscious, right? The subconscious.
Is there a way to like say that you have a problem with like your subconscious? Is there a way to like get that treated since you can't really control it?
Right, and that's one of when she brings up shadow work, that's what she means. There are ways to tap into what you feel subconsciously, and it's seen through actions, right? You could say, that's why people say actions speak louder than words, is because, I mean, you could say things all day that come from your front brain, but, typically what you do, like actually, like your physical, what you do is connected to your subconscious. Yeah. So doing things like shadow work and unlocking the real reason behind some of the things you do, and making that to a marriage with what you have been trained to think and trained to do, it allows you to kind of defeat some of these genetic
makeups, because the shadow is literally, they call it the dark side. It's because it's literally these negative effects that are continuously happening to you that you continue to negate.
With that, when is there a point? Because obviously we're identifying our generational cycles, and we're identifying what are subconscious, and we consciously know what we're doing, but when does it come a point where the rest of your family needs to know, y'all are treating me this way, and y'all might not be y'all are treating other people this way, this is how y'all are acting?
You know what I had to realize about that?
It's affecting everybody.
It's kind of like I had to leave it unsaid, because if I addressed it, it would impact me in a negative way. So I think in terms of like breaking this specific chain here, I have to start with me. Even though I know everything, I know what all I need to get tackled. But when I say it's starting with me, I know I would not let this happen with my other children, or I would make sure like these specific impacts does not impact my children from their grandmother or their grandfather. That specifically is where it would start.
Wait, okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm getting this right. So in the back mind or the shadow,
the unconscious shadow
that you guys are talking about, we have actions that we have been doing, or we have actions that were they either passed down to us, or were they learned when we were younger?
Let me give an example, like to make it like better, right? Yeah. So let's say you wanted to go to a party, right? And your mom says that she could take you. And then you dress, you downstairs, you like, we finna get lit at the kickback. We finna
get litty like a kid.
What?
Anyway, it's lit, you ready, right? She comes in and she's like, I can't take you anymore, right?
Explanation.
Now, you might have been trained as a person, especially, dealing with like people pleasers and things like that. And your front brain to be like, okay, that's fine, right? Yeah. Some people are able to address that. No, that really made me feel like crap. But some aren't, right? I think all of us have a certain level of emotional intelligence that knows how we actually feel, or how it actually made us feel. But for people who are literally lost in just moving every day, they lose, how do I actually feel about this? And another example is for people who are influencers. So where everything you do is watch. You have to watch what you say. You have to watch your facial expressions. Celebrities, like if Beyonce was, they be zooming in on Beyonce so hard at the BET. Of it, like, what is her reaction? So she literally always has to be cognizant of what she's doing. At some point, she is losing. Well, I'm not saying this is her situation specifically, but for some people, at some point, you lose how you actually feel. What is your actual reaction to some of these things because of what we are taught and what we are, what is deemed appropriate to do and what's not. Okay. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, okay. So when it comes to these generational cycles, how does a person even come across generational cycles? Especially ones that are embedded in something that are so subconscious.
How do we identify
how do you identify them, and what's the harm in keeping them if you've seen that you can still process or work with them?
Right.
Yeah. That's a really valid question, honestly.
Yeah. I think it starts with emotional intelligence, like you said, though.
Can I provide a statistic? Okay, for the Black community, there's a 3% growth rate from poverty, meaning that 97% of the time, if you were born in poverty, you stay in poverty, right? That's horrible. Yeah. And like Dave said, it's emotional intelligence. But if all your life, and it's crazy. My dad, one of his favorite artists, Play a Fly. He's like, he's a older artist, underground, really. If you If you know underground Atlanta music, then you know. But yeah, should know, right? But he talks about this concept of ghetto eyes, and Sonata the speech similar to this stained glass eyes. It's like if you have only seen this amount of stuff, what you think is capable, what you think you're capable of, and knowledge and truth is literally constricted to this much stuff.
All that you've seen.
So it becomes a generational cycle because nobody is venturing out. There is no new perspective being brought. The music you listen to talks about the same thing.
Exactly.
The movies you watch and the television shows, reality TV, everything.
Bro, did y'all hear her synthesis?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said Plato's allegory of the cave.
That was good.
And that's exactly what it is.
Thank you,
guys. Knowledge and truth becomes restricted to what you think you know, right? And you don't know what you don't know.
And I'm thinking with my previous question about asking when you said you just have to leave it unknown with the Plato's allegory of the cave, you can find that truth. Somebody finds that truth, and they try to bring her back to stop the curses from other family. Yeah. To your siblings, to the people who you're related to, so that they can stop the trail, but they're not listening.
And that is literally why it makes me so mad when we hear this conversation like, whitewashed and this. And I love that there are so many different type of black people, and I hate that in the media and in movies and in films they make the black experience one thing, the come up,
a monolith,
and all of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Literally.
What was I reading where they talk about it? It's trauma porn, basically, with the black community. Like people literally love seeing black people
go through
the struggle, right? And the only way to really break these generational cycles is
addressing it.
This hole that I was talking about of everything that you see is opened, and it takes Sanai, who grew up different than Jonah, who grew up different than me, who grew up different than somebody who lives in Lakewood, who grew up different than somebody living in Sandy Springs, who went to PWIs all their life. If there is no expansion of community, it is there. We're never gonna break these cycles,
right? And I think that a point that you really just brought up, or you and Sanai both brought up, saying the instance for. If you are articulate and if you pronunciate your words and you have a certain intelligence to you, you get deemed as whitewashed or you are acting white. It's like people that are trying to break those generational curses because they get deemed as less than, and it makes people not want to embrace in that breaking of the cycle because they get deemed as not black enough. They get hated upon. And it's like, how are we gonna try to want to improve our community, but when doing so we get criticized for doing that, right?
Yeah, and that's why honestly addressing your generational cycles and through the extra layer of if you decide to go through shadow work therapy, that's a process that not everyone is willing to take,
right? Because
that literally takes you through steps that are very, very deep, and and you're learning yourself as well as you're learning things about others,
right? And
then you're trying to figure out the right path to take, because I think I keep forgetting that we're so young trying to address these certain things, and I'm like, we're 16, 17, 15, trying to say, hey, this needs to stop today,
right?
And I want to read the specific quote addressing shadows, because the shadow is the dark side of what you are trying to go away from,
right?
But he says we cannot eliminate the shadow. It stays with us as our dark brother or sister. Trouble arises when we fail to see it, for then, to be sure, it is standing right behind us.
Who said that?
Wow.
This is specifically from this. I got everything. ScottJeffrey.com. He's an amazing person. But anyway, I think that's exactly where we have to start. Shadows never leave. It's like walking in the freaking parking lot, and you're just walking like, oh, there goes my shadow. It's like we have to really address our shadow, because if we don't, where are we gonna go from there?
But the thing about shadows is that shadows only work if there's light.
Exactly.
I don't like that.
That's what it is. I like that.
Right. Wait. And I'm gonna tell you what I mean by that. Right. Yeah. Shadows. When do shadows appear? When it's dark and there's a flash of light. Right. Yeah. And so the flash of light here is that there's glimpses of hope.
Yeah.
There is glimpses of hope for for people who are trying to break those generational cycles. And we learn in psychology how Freud, he specifically talks about childhood and how much upbringing plays a role into personality development, right? It's 5 stages. I'm not going to get into the stages.
Yeah.
But it's important. I wanted to bring it up here because that shadow is it's just what's a word for it's a composition of many different elements that either did not have time to finish. We in a past podcast we talked about emotional stunting.
Right.
You know, the shadow is more than just my unconscious. Your unconscious is made up of so many things. And so that's why Dave was saying if you go through the process of kind of unveiling some of these things, it is not for everybody.
It's not.
It is not for everybody. You have to be ready because you are peeling back layers. Especially if you are older, you are pulling back layers
on top
and
of
layers.
Right. And the thing is, also to that point, when you say you have to be ready to break that generational cycle because it's not easy.
It is not.
Because
and nobody is encouraging people.
Right.
There is a small community who is encouraging people to break cycles.
Right.
And then on top of that, they're not even providing you on how to do it.
They are cheering you on, but will not help you.
Oh God, I'm like, whoa,
they're not providing
whoa.
you any resources. They're not helping you, like even support you. Like it's like you have to be so mentally ready and emotionally ready too, because it's gonna be emotional.
Because when I say you can literally fall in the deepest parts of depression with this, because I tried to do this myself and I had to take a pause and say, hey, this is not me in this very chapter of my life. I had to take a pause and say, hey, let's start this next year, or let's start this next month later. You have to be, like you said, emotionally available and also have emotional intelligence to even walk through this.
But with everything that everybody said, I hear like, okay, let's break these generational cycles, but I don't think that cycles... I believe cycles is also inclusive of the benefits.
Yeah, that's
So I feel like we just need to talk on and focus on the benefits. Some of them don't need to be broken down or be broken down, but they need to be.
I have a question.
Yeah, made bigger.
I have a question. What are some generational cycles that Black people have that are positive?
Similar, and I was going to bring this up for you tonight. I understand that there's pressure of going to an HBCU and, pledging, right? But I love the general cycle of getting an education. Yeah. I love that is normalized in your family and is expected and common that people go to school, And I feel like those are the cycles that we need to create. Me and my dad talk about generational wealth a lot, which is something that many Black families do not have. And I tell this all the time, but going to a PWI, literally people, and it's mainly, white kids will talk about how they're going to redecorate their mom's home when they inherited their parents' home. I'm like, many Black people aspire to buy their parents' homes once they get on. Yeah. It's kind of like we're working backwards. We're supposed to be inheriting and adding on. And inheriting and adding on. It's like we're providing for people who came before us. Right? And we get it. We have to make up from things that we couldn't control at one point. But to kind of crystallize what I'm saying is that to break these cycles, we need to affirm the link chains that are strong, that are helpful. But all while doing, and this is the plight of it, all while doing that, we got to destroy some of the ones that have put us at a disadvantage, along with the disadvantage that was given to us when we hit this nation.
Yes, that.
You're right.
Literally, I agree so much.
So.
It's like so much. It's like so much. You saw that pause. I feel like that pause was needed because it's like the impact of what we've been saying. It's so much and it's so real. It's like sometimes you just have to pause to reflect and understand and consume all the knowledge and all the understanding that we just broke down.
And please, and understand that this is not a one-stop job.
It's
right. You gotta come in, sauce some off, take a break, come back, and sauce some more off until we finally break it. Don't ever think that you just got this one clean break and it's not going to be. But I think we understand that the work needs to be done.
Yeah, the work needs to be done.
And that's the first part.
Right.
Yeah, we this right now, we about to break it.
Generational
we're
cycles.
breaking generational
we're breaking
cycles
it every time we hit the table.
Right now. And I honestly think that, like I always say, we are so dope. We're so dope. And
what about you gonna hype us up?
Yes, and I just really hope y'all realize that because to have this space to be comfortable and talk to people that have the same goal, like not the same goals, but we all want one thing,
Yeah, one thing, the one thing only.
Right, we all have goals, and that's all that matters. And it's like this space is so open-minded and so like just a place to express yourself, and I feel like that's so necessary, and I'm just so grateful for it.
Of course.
Y'all make sure y'all tune in next week, because one thing about us,
we gonna talk about it.
I'm here like, wait, what? How do you actually use shadow work?